All right, everybody, give me 1 second. We're about to go live here. I got to link in everybody. I'm going to save these changes, and when we get going, we will be good to go. Waiting on these check marks. All right, 1 second. All right, and we are live. What's up, everybody? Welcome into the Falcons Podcast with me, your host, Garrett Chapman. Really excited to jump in with you and all the folks over there on Falcons on SI, bringing some fantastic Falcons content to you. While you're here, go ahead, give me a follow at GChapATL on Twitter. Stay up to date with everything we got rolling out. I just put out a really interesting thing just on what I think it's interesting is the projected 53-man roster. We'll get into that here a little bit. If I've already had a couple of people kind of reach out and say, what gives, man? Why do you have this person, not that person? Well, it's my opinion. First and foremost, and I reserve the right to my opinion, just like you do. But ultimately, we're going to talk a little bit about it. I'll give you some of my rationale because we got a jam-packed show for you today. Lots to get into. I will be taking your questions. So if you're following, doesn't matter where you are, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, drop your questions in the comments, and I will get to them as I can. I will get to as many as I can. I can't promise I'm going to get to all of them, but I do come back and read the comments. So if you get a second, drop them in there. While you're at it, make sure to like, make sure to subscribe, make sure your friends are watching this too, so they can get in on some of this Falcons content because we're gonna have a lot of fun. Got a big game coming up tomorrow night on Friday night. It's the Tennessee Titans for the third time the Falcons are going to see them. Maybe there won't be any scrums or anything like that, but you never know. But tonight I got the 53-man roster projection. I've got some interesting what ifs facing the Falcons. I put out the question into the Twitterverse, and I got a couple of people jumped in there and they dropped some comments of very interesting what ifs. So we'll address some of those. Plus, I have some of my own, and if you have some in the comments, I'd be happy to drop into those as well. But again, we'll get to your questions after we get into all of that. We got a handful of people jumping into the chat. We got Xavier Littman, got Dantes Jackson. What is up, my guys? I've got C Electrician. We got a couple people in there. Yeah, it's a good questions. It says, hey, Scott, I DM'd your ex about the ticket. He's going to be in touch with you guys. He's got something else coming up for you. He was supposed to reach back out with somebody. I wasn't 100% sure what went on with that, but he will be letting you guys know what's going on with that when we can. But what's up, everybody? Thank you so much for joining in. Let's just jump right into this 53-man roster. And I want to say this before we get going. For the Atlanta Falcons, this is my 53-man roster projection. This is my opinion. A lot can change between now and the August 26th deadline. It's 4 o'clock on August 26th. As soon as the last preseason games finish up, they're going to get a little bit of time to deliberate and let the players know what's going to be happening. There's also going to be ad drop, just like fantasy football. There's a waiver wire that everything goes through, and people have the opportunity to go grab some other players. But for me today, this is what it looks like. Drop it in the comments if you think I'm crazy, or just tell me how smart I am. I take compliments really well, just like most people. So I'm very excited to drop this in here. So let's start with the offense. What do you say? Got 53 men, and it's very difficult to really decide. We're going to drop through 3 quarterbacks. We'll start here. The obvious, Michael Penix, Kirk Cousins, they're going to be on the roster. Barring any real changes, I don't really see much changing in that regard. Easton Stick is going to be your third quarterback. It's pretty common nowadays that in the NFL, you carry multiple quarterbacks. I don't expect that the Falcons are going to be any different. So I would not be surprised if Easton Stick is the third guy there. Emory Jones, of course, in this instance, would be getting cut. I would not be surprised at all if they immediately jump in and add him to the practice squad. He was somebody who was very valuable for them, especially when they got to get the look for Jaden Daniels late in the season. Very valuable in that regard, but we'll see what actually ends up happening. Easton Stick can still give you some of those reps as well, but I wouldn't be surprised if Emory Jones sticks around. Running back, Bijan Robinson, Tyler Algier, those two are roster locks. I'd be blown away if anything changes in that regard. It's not like either of those two guys are going to get cut. Carlos Washington, and that's that third running back spot. That's where it gets a little bit more interesting. If Nathan, Elijah Dotson, Jashawn Corbin, you've got some other guys there who could potentially play their way up into that roster spot. Carlos Washington's been dealing with a hamstring injury, hasn't been present at camp. He's still my favorite to win the spot just because but these things change. They change all the time. At wide receiver, Drake London is obviously he's going to be your top guy. Darnell Mooney, Ray McLeod, Kadarius Hodge. Those are my locks. Like bona fide, there's nothing changing about that. Jamal Agnew is also somebody who I feel pretty confident in that he is going to make the roster. I'd be very surprised if he doesn't make the roster. He's not going to be taking offensive snaps necessarily, but he will be taking the primary punt and kick return duties for the Falcons in 25. He's very electric. And if you haven't had a chance to see him, I'd go check out some of those highlights. I don't have time to show you any highlights on this show, but the YouTube, after we're done talking through on the podcast, make sure to head over there and check out some Jamal Agnew highlights because he is electric. Raheem Morris said he showed the guys what Jamal Agnew was capable of doing during training camp at various points this summer. But the last roster spot, I'm going to give it to Casey Washington. It's somebody who I feel like has really established himself as the primary X receiver in the wake of the Darnell Mooney injury. I would be very surprised if he doesn't make the roster right now. He's run almost exclusively with the ones. He has a fantastic relationship and rapport with Michael Penix that goes back all the way to last season. I had a great story on this, or they had a great story, and I just put the words together. But Casey Washington, after all of whenever they would go through install last summer, he and Michael Penix were both rookies, and he would text Michael Penix, and to the point where Penix was surprised if something wasn't coming his way, any kind of message. And it was, he would get it as soon as install was done, and they would go out into the Flowery Branch parking lot and they would do walkthroughs together. That's where it started. And now it's to where we are now. And these guys, he likes going to Casey Washington. So in the wake of this Darnell Mooney injury, it just kind of elevated him. And we really haven't seen David Sills, Carlos Washington, Dylan Drummond, Nick Nash, DJ Chark, guys like that, who some people viewed as a favorite. Some people still view as a favorite. I know David Sills is some people see him as the prototype for Drake London, obviously he's your poor man's Drake London, but he has that same kind of body frame, and having big bodied guys like that is always very valuable. So I would be a little surprised if they go somewhere other than Casey Washington. Let's get into the tight end position here. We've got Kyle Pitts, obviously, and Charlie Warner. Warner's going to be your primary blocking tight end. Kyle Pitts, he's been lining up almost exclusively with wide receivers, but I mean, what's new there? Felipe Franks have kind of gone back and forth. I think they might be leaning Franks, and I might go back to Quintaro on the next one. So we'll see on that position. As far as the offensive line, I get a little worried about the Falcons' offensive line. I said this on the last podcast, just in general about where they stand behind your starters. I'd say the starting Falcons offensive line is about as good as it comes in the NFL. You're steady across the board. You have guys who stay healthy across the board. Your left tackle has been playing football for 13 years. He's been there forever, and he's been very good forever. Matt Bergeron is a solid left guard. Ryan Newsel is a smart center. The bar didn't drop last year when he stepped in. And then Chris Lindstrom, he's the best right guard in the NFL. You can absolutely make that argument. And then Caleb McGarry has his strengths where he's very sound in run blocking, as leaves a little bit to be desired in times in his pass protection, but you can live and learn with that. You can survive with what you have there. Storm Norton's going to be your swing tackle, and Kyle Hinton I have as the swing guard. But then you get to Javon Gwynn. I'm not super confident that any of the centers that the Falcons have on their roster right now are going to be on the 53-man roster. That's just where I stand. It's going to be some unnamed player who gets cut from another franchise. Again, this is my opinion. Javon Gwynn is entering his third year with the Atlanta Falcons, and he really hasn't taken a big step forward. Not in a big enough way that I feel confident in him really stepping into to be the starting center if Ryan Newsel were to go down. I would be very concerned there. And ultimately, you get guys like Joshua Gray, you get guys like Jake Hansen, who they've already gone to the waiver wire, to the free agency ranks, I should say, to go pick him up. And I don't know if we've seen really enough from them to make me feel comfortable in establishing them in that spot. So if they were to lose Ryan Newsel, I think that would put them in a very precarious situation. Matthew Cendrick, I have him on the chopping block. Tyron Wheatley, Brandon Parker, and Jordan Williams, they're at the chopping block as well for the tackle position. But Jack Nelson is probably the first big one, the first big disappointment, I would say. He's looked okay At times, he's looked not good at others, and he still has a long way to go. I just think his role right now for the Falcons is on the practice squad, and that's where he's going to be, and he's going to continue to develop. I don't see him necessarily immediately transitioning and being a backup tackle as of right now, because you have Storm Norton, and I know he's been hurt too, but he has been steady for you at the position. He brings a lot of size, and he stepped in and when the time calls, and he's done a really good job. All right, that's our offense. That's our offense. If you missed it, hit the rewind button and go check it out. You can also go to si.com/NFL/Falcons. I just published it, and you can go to GChatBTL on Twitter as well, and you can find it there. Folks, let's move into the defense, because this is one. I already see a comment on the down there saying Kobe Bryant and Nick Nash, hopefully they make at least the practice squad. I hope you're right, Beasley. I hope you're right. Let's get into the defense here. Maybe that's a little foreshadowing for you folks, but let's start with the defensive line. It's going to be David Onyemata. He's not going anywhere. Morgan Fox, Ruka Roro, Zach Harrison, Brandon Dorless, Taquan Graham, and Kentavious Street. When you get to the bottom there, when you get to Kentavious Street, I think there's a chance it could end up being a LaCale London. I think that's not a crazy thought necessarily, but they're going to turn over a lot of guys. I've seen some roster projections that have fewer defensive linemen, but they've talked a lot about how this defensive line wants to turn over. It wants to get a lot of bodies in there. They want to keep these guys fresh, maybe for even if they just go 2 or 3 plays, So I would be very surprised if they don't keep at least what we have here, which is 7 defensive linemen on the roster. Hell, they might go 8. You never know, but you got to plug and play and move people all over. But let's move to this edge outside linebacker position. You got Leonard Floyd, who they just brought in free agency. He's in he's in a 1-year deal. I was going to say he was the last year of his deal, which is technically true, but he is in a 1-year contract with the Falcons. Jalen Walker, James Pierce, the rookies, they're obviously going to make the roster here. Arnold Ebiketie is going to make the roster, and then Braylon Trice is going to be the final guy over there at the outside linebacker edge position. And this is one where I kind of go back and forth with the Khalid Kareem. Khalid Kareem is somebody who's been getting a lot of run, specifically with the 2s, but he's also factored in and he played with the 1s at various times. Maybe they go Khalid Kareem, because I worry about Braylon Trice fitting into the scheme for Jeff Ulbrich. That's my only place where it stops. But they also need his size. They need somebody who's a little bit bigger. We shall see on that one. But you might be curious too, because D'Angelo Malone's not there. Well, if you go down one little rung right there, go down to linebacker, you can get down to Caden Ellis, Divine Diablo, J.D. Bertrand, D'Angelo Malone, and Josh Woods. Yes, I have D'Angelo Malone lining up as an interior linebacker, and it's because that's what he played last Friday. And we talked to him about it on Wednesday. We talked to Jeff Ulbrich about it on Tuesday. We talked about Raheem Morris on Tuesday as well. They are trying to cross-train him. They're trying to find a role for him on defense. He's a former 3rd-round pick. He's somebody who has a lot of athleticism. He's been solid for this team, mostly on special teams. That's generally where his roles come in. And that's why I feel comfortable keeping him here on the roster, because he's somebody who can shoot the edge on special teams, and he can be very effective in that role. I feel very confident with him staying on this roster, because he does bring other things outside of what he does on 11v11 when the defense is out on the field. So Caden Ellis obviously is your top guy. Divine Diablo was brought in here for the sole purpose of being an effective interior linebacker. J.D. Bertrand was a first-year player. He's in his 2nd year, so he's a 1-year pro. And then Josh Woods has been a standout in camp. He led the team in tackles last Friday. He's one where I could potentially move into a cut position, and he would go straight to the practice squad, in my opinion. He's somebody who adds something at the position. He's not freaky athletic necessarily, but he's somebody who finds the ball, and there's value for a linebacker who just is where the ball is. It's a very important trait. It's not something you can always teach. Sometimes it's just in somebody's blood, and that's what it seems like for Josh Woods. But I was able to do this. I finagled this a little bit. And maybe I cheated. Maybe I didn't. And again, this is my opinion. I have no inside information this is not injury news that I'm sharing with anybody. But I think that Troy Anderson is going to start the season on the injured reserve. We haven't seen him at all in camp to this point. He's on the PUP list. That's where he remains. I have not seen anything or heard anything to the contrary. But that's just where I stand right now. We'll get down to the cornerback position. And also, there's, for clarification, that opens up a roster spot, so you're able to hold on to a Josh Woods. If that were to change, I would imagine Troy Anderson, if he was going to start the season healthy, that is the change that I would have right there. Let's shoot down to the cornerback position. We've got A.J. Terrell, Mike Hughes, Clark Phillips, D. Alford, Billy Bowman, and Natron Brooks. You get down to Clark Phillips and Natron Brooks. Those are two who I feel like could change through the rest of camp. Clark Phillips, Raheem Morris mentioned, was dealing with a rib injury he picked up in camp. He did not play last Friday, and I do not think he's going to play when we get to game time tomorrow night against the Tennessee Titans, but we shall see. We shall see. That's just one where, I mean, it is what it is. And you get hurt and it's an unfortunate reality of the sport, and he might get Wally pipped. You never know. And for those who are not familiar with the baseball reference, Wally Pipp sat down for an injury and he never got to come back in. It's just the reality of sports. I mean, it is what it is. And I don't foresee that happening yet. I think he's somebody who can kind of give you that combo position. He can play nickel. He can play the outside cornerback position. I think that's really valuable there. If it's not Clark Phillips, I think there's a chance you make it a Mike Ford, just because you have a lot more money at the position invested into a Mike Ford, because you go and get him from the free agency ranks. He just signed off of the Cleveland Browns. He has experience here in Atlanta, albeit in a different system, but he's been in Atlanta before, and he's somebody that a lot of people are familiar with. He also gives you something on special teams too, which is a very valuable trait. Somebody who is able to do a lot of different things, that's very valuable in the NFL, especially when you only have 53 guys on your roster. D. Alford, yes, I see some people asking. Beasley, I see you dropped the question. D. Alford, question mark, question mark? Yeah, D. Alford's been the primary guy going with the ones, and he was good last year. Good enough. I think serviceable is probably the better word. And I think the difference for what D. Alford has done in camp, and to this point at least, the difference is you're not going all the way to the ground. That is where D. Alford kind of falls flat a little bit for me. He's somebody who he's not as effective when it comes to tackling. You kind of need that with your nickelback defender. Now, it's not a primary trait that you want to have from him, but his ball skills are very good. We saw those against the Tennessee Titans, specifically on Wednesday. He had the interception. He looked really solid there. But we'll see as far as everything else. If Billy Bowman is with the guy who they brought in specifically to be the starter at some point. D. Alford has been the starter. But Billy Bowman, I expect to, at some point, supplant him. He is a bigger guy. He's a guy who's going to give you a little bit more just in the tackling department. And then Natron Brooks, it's between him and Lamar Jackson for me. I think that's where it stands. I see some people are dropping there some questions about what about C.J. Henderson? Is he here to replace Clark Phillips? Yeah, theoretically, he could. He's going to come in and he's going to provide some competition for the position. But anything with assuming that C.J. Henderson is going to come in here and immediately be like an automatic to make the roster, I think is not accurate. I just have a hard time believing that. He's a journeyman. He's been to a lot of different places. There's a reason for that generally, and we'll see on everything else. But let's move down to the safety position, and I'll continue taking your questions. I see them coming to flow in. I'm trying to get them as I can, but I'm trying to finish up here, and then we can get to some of your questions and some Falcons what ifs. So we'll do that here in just a second. Finishing here with the safety position, it's Jesse Bates, Jordan Fuller, Xavier Watson, DeMarco Hellams. I don't think that's going to change all that much. Just in general, that's one of those positions I just don't think is going to there's not much room for switching around there. I think what's more important when you get to the safety position is what are you going to do as the starting safety? Is it going to be a Jordan Fuller? I think there's a very good chance that he starts the season as the starter. I think there's a good chance that Xavier Watts supplants him. Xavier Watts has taken a lot of reps with the ones when the Tennessee Titans were here, and he's looked good. And the DeMarco Hellams look fantastic. He gives you a different edge that the other guys don't. It's not that he's better or worse or whatever. It's just that guy likes to hit. And I think there's a lot of value in having a guy who is just like a Willie Moe type, a Keanu Neal type, somebody who wants to pop, and really take somebody's head off. But yeah, no, that's my roster projection. I have specialists on there for anybody who is curious about that. I have Younghoe Koo winning the roster position. I think that sort of kicker battle is already pretty much said and done. The depth chart goes a little bit deeper into what the kick return and punt return look like, and I released that one as well, so you can go check that one out there. All right, folks, I see some questions coming in. I'll move the what ifs down for a little bit longer. So if you still have some questions, or maybe you have some Falcon what ifs, Make sure to drop those in here. But while we're at it, make sure you drop a like, make sure to subscribe, make sure to follow the podcast. We do this every single week. I mean, Scott and Nick, they do this in the mornings, Mondays and Wednesdays at 8:30. And I'll be here with you 6 o'clock on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I love talking Falcons with you. So I love doing all that stuff. So please, the more you guys can support, and I appreciate all of you guys for being in here with likes and subscriptions and things like that. That's how we keep the lights on over here. So I really appreciate you. Let's keep moving along. So Xavier Dantes, thank you so much for jumping in here. Xavier, he says, hey, Garrett. I say hello, Xavier. John Harrell says, good afternoon. Good afternoon. McMactown says, what's up? What's up, buddy? All right. We got a little bit here. Beasley, you said some things. CJ Anderson, D. Alford. What about CJ Henderson? Rusty Moore Jr.? Yes, that's a decent question. I think CJ Henderson has a chance to make the roster. He's got an outside chance. I think that's probably his best bet. He's joining camp really late. And there's a reason he was a free agent as long as he was. He bounced around to a lot of different teams. I think he adds an athletic element that some of these guys may not have. And that's why the Falcons are bringing him in. You bring in athletes. That's why you bring in athletes, guys who can play football. And we'll see what he can do in that situation. Maybe Henderson can come in here and replicate Clark Phillips or maybe replace him in that role. But we'll see. I'll keep you guys updated. I'll keep an eye out on that for you. It's come up enough times that I'll make a note to go check that out when we're at training camp next week. And I'll try to bring you an answer as soon as I have one. Marcus Cook says, I think Billy Bowman ends up starting. Yeah, I tend to agree. I think Billy Bowman is probably going to be your first rookie that gets significant playing time. I think he's going to be your first rookie who starts. I don't think it's that crazy of a thought. I think he adds something that he has experience playing in the box. It's something that he was really good at when he was at Oklahoma. It was one of the biggest reasons why Terry Fontenot brought him in from Brent Venables' system. It translates really well. And I think he's going to come in here and be a very effective player for the Falcons early and often. He has that skill set that kind of translates. A little less of a learning curve than some of these other guys. And Xavier Watts, I would have said that in that same thought, but he missed a lot of time at the beginning of training camp for an undisclosed reason. We weren't actually officially informed of what that reason was. So I'm going to keep it that way. Let's move down here a little bit further. Rusty says D. Alford is not just bad at tackling. He gets burnt in coverage all the time as well. I mean, that's not 100% fair. There are a lot of other things that factor into this sort of thing. He did get beat a lot. And I would say, to your point, Rusty, his play definitely trickled down by the end of the season. It's why this team put such an emphasis on going and getting guys like Billy Bowman to bring in and get some competition. You go and get Mike Ford out of free agency. You have 3 guys who are fighting for this battle just at the top, too. So you have other guys further down the roster who are all competing for this position. Those are going to be your top 3 guys, and all 3 guys ran with the ones when the Tennessee Titans were here on Tuesday and Wednesday. So don't be surprised if Billy Bowman ends up being the guy. We just talked about that, but just to continue with your thought there. Eric Noah, question about Troy Anderson. Do you think he plays at all this season? Yeah, I do. I think he will absolutely play. I think the Falcons are counting on him to play, at least in some regard. They're going to turn the linebacker position over, not quite as much as they would for, say, like the interior defensive line necessarily. Like Caden Ellis is a guy that you want to have on the field as much as you possibly can. He is the most important player in your front 7. I think you can make that argument. I think Troy Anderson is somebody who's flashed some of his potential. I mean, go back to what he was in that Saints game last year in New Orleans, the game he got hurt, ironically. I mean, that guy had like 16 tackles or something. He had a fumble recovery for a touchdown. He has the physical traits. And I actually think that Troy Anderson's skill sets lend themselves to being very successful in this scheme that Jeff Ulbrich runs here in Atlanta now. I think he's going to be one of the biggest benefactors of that. And bringing in a Divine Diablo was the best they could do as a one-to-one replacement for Troy Anderson, and to allow him to kind of come along a little bit slower. As soon as he gets healthy, I think he's going to be supplanted or brought back into the lineup, and he's going to be there competing with Divine Diablo, who they call an avatar. He's a physical freak. But as soon as he's back, I think he's going to provide some fantastic depth. As far as re-signing him and what he looks like in the future, I can't say anything on that. That's a future thing. But as of right now, I think the Falcons are going to be a better football team when Troy Anderson does come back. Marcus Cook, he says they need to find ways to get DeMarco Hellams on the field. Yeah, I completely agree. Having a guy who likes to pop, having a guy who likes to hit, that is a very valuable thing. because it strikes the fear of God in a quarterback and wide receivers. If you have a guy back there who's willing to do that or able to do that, that's a very valuable trait. And there's a reason that people didn't throw on Cam Chancellor or Troy Polamalu, and I'm not comparing him one-to-one with those guys, but those are guys who like to lay the wood. And if that kind of thing is going to be happening on the back half of a defense, quarterback's going to think twice. The quarterback is going to hold the ball maybe a tick longer, and maybe that helps your front seven. So little things like that factor into football in a very big way. We'll see. He has little things that he has to get better at. He's got to get better in coverage. He's got to get a little bit. He's got to build on some of his fluidity. Jeff Ulbrich talked about it. He said that that was actually one of the things he's noticed since coming to Flowery Branch down from New York, is that DeMarco Hellams has worked on a lot of those things. He is better. He's just not all the way there. And when you get a guy like Xavier Watts or Jordan Fuller, a veteran like that, those are traits that those guys have. And I don't think that DeMarco Hellams has it at that level, but he does hit hard. And I think there's value in that in and of itself. He's going to have a home on this roster. Just depends on what his role is going to be. Philip Crawford says, I love the new fire this team has. I completely agree. I love the fire. I think the passion, the energy, the excitement that's been up there at Flowery Branch, it's felt, and you see the edge. You saw the edge on defense in the first half of training camp. You saw the edge from the offense on Wednesday when you got Michael Penix getting into the middle of a scrap, which I wouldn't say that it's something that I really want my quarterback doing all that much, but it still tells me that we got a dog at the quarterback position, and somebody who's going to stand up for himself. It's somebody who's going to fight hard for his guys. Colton, who's going to start? Who's going to be beside Jesse? So Jesse Bates, of course, is your all-pro safety. Who's lines up next to him? I think it's going to be Jordan Fuller to start the season. Xavier Watts, I would expect, is going to come in there and get plenty of run in that second spot. But ultimately, I think it's Fuller's job. That's as of right now. Xavier Watts, he could still step up and have a really big game on Friday. I'm assuming that he's going to play. We don't have a formal answer there. We didn't have a chance to talk to Raheem on Thursday, obviously. So because we're up at camp today, so we'll have to find out with everybody else what that roster looks like. Maybe we'll have some updates for you ahead of the game as far as who plays and who doesn't. But no, as of right now, I think it's going to be Jordan Fuller. He's got the leg up. All right. Keep dropping in. Keep bringing all these comments. While you're at it, make sure to like, make sure to subscribe. I want to get into some of the biggest Falcons what-ifs. The biggest what-ifs facing the Atlanta Falcons. I put the question out on Twitter, at GChapATL. And I had a couple of questions that popped up. And these are some that I really want to get to. We're going to start with this one right here. Sam the Slayer. Sam, you need fewer underscores in your name, man. It's at _ I am _ Sam _ That's a lot of underscores. Sam the Slayer, thank you for the question. What if Zac Robinson takes a step up in year 2? Well, let's take a look at that. Well, I think the biggest question here is, what does that step up look like? I think anybody who goes from year 1 to year 2, you would assume that they're going to get better, right? I don't think that he's going to get worse, certainly, but what does getting better actually look like? I think you left a little bit to be desired. I think revisionist history says that the Falcons were maybe a little bit better than they actually were, right? And it depends on what Falcons you're looking at. If you look at the first, say, 9 games of the season, the Falcons were 6-3. You have Kirk Cousins playing at a very high level. He looks like he's a potential fringe MVP type candidate. The offense was scoring at a high clip. I mean, he had 500 yards of offense against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He goes wire to wire with the Kansas City Chiefs. He beats the Eagles. I mean, it looks, everybody's flying high. But then the next couple games happen. And this team ends up scoring just under 23 points per game, which is top 15 in the NFL, but it's not necessarily that top 10 offense that a lot of people say it is. They did pick up a lot of yards, 369 yards per game. That's top 6 in the NFL. But ultimately, I think what it all comes back to, I think Zac Robinson's a really good offensive coordinator. Let's start there. But the second thing is the fact that it's the Jimmies and the Joes and not the X's and O's, right? It's an old moniker. It's more applicable, I would say, in college football or even high school football for that matter. But who are the guys on this team? Who are the guys that are going to take that next big step forward? You look at a Bijan Robinson, you see what he's potentially capable of doing. He finished 3rd in the league in rushing yards. He was 4th in all-purpose yards. He was tied for 7th in touchdowns, led the NFL in missed tackles. I mean, the guy's a freak of nature. But can he add that explosive element to his offense? If he can, you're looking at Bijan Robinson potentially being an offensive player of the year type of candidate. Drake London's an elite wide receiver. He's fourth in the NFL in receiving. He had 9 touchdowns last year. I think it's not about Drake elevating. I think it's about other people around Drake London elevating. And looking at you, Darnell, need you to stay healthy. The offensive line, it's solid. It's very good. But if the offensive line doesn't stay healthy, I get very worried. We talked about that when we were going through the roster. So when we go through all of this, you look at the Jimmies and the Joes, and I say that most of those guys are going to take a step forward. But the biggest one that you have to keep an eye on, it's the quarterback. And it's not something that's necessarily the most popular thing to hear, right? It's not something that a lot of people who are Falcons fans, yourself, myself included, it's not something that they really want to hear. And what if Michael Penix is not as good a quarterback? He may not be, and that's okay. He's still 25, 24 years old. He's still learning his way in the NFL. He's still figuring out how this whole thing works. Kirk Cousins has been around for 12, 13 years. That doesn't happen by accident. That's a guy who's been around the NFL. That's a guy who knows how to win games in the NFL. That is very valuable. And the Falcons have to stick by him. They have to stick by Michael Penix while he goes through these growing pains, because there are a lot of fans out there. There are a lot of fans out there who've said that they're just expecting him to come in and drop 42, 43, 4,400 yards, and he's going to throw for 30 plus touchdowns, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And he's going to lead this team, and they're going to score 30 points a game, and oh my God, it's going to be incredible. But there's also a reality where that doesn't happen. It's one where he is effectively a rookie quarterback, where he's a guy who's played 3 NFL games. He's got some growing that he needs to do. So back to the question, what does a step forward look like for Zac Robinson? I don't think it's Zac Robinson who needs to take a step forward. I think Zac Robinson did a lot of growing from week 1 on. Zac Robinson was a much better play caller by the end of the season than he was at the beginning of the season. And if you don't believe me, go look at the highlights from that damn game against the Steelers. That was ugly. And I think a lot of that had to do with Zac Robinson, just to the point where he basically came to the media and apologized after the fact. It has so much more to do with the players. So much more to do with the players. Like, this team, ultimately, it needs to stay healthy, like most teams in the NFL. But if they are able to get into the top 10 in scoring, and you see that growth from Michael Penix on a week-to-week basis, or hell, even a quarter-to-quarter basis, I think this offense is going to be really good. I'm a big believer in Michael Penix. I'm a big believer in Zac Robinson, Bijan Robinson, Drake London, all these guys. Kyle Pitts, maybe we can see him take a big step forward. Maybe that connection with Michael Penix is something that's going to be recognized and realized finally in 2025. We'll see. But ultimately, to answer your question, I think he can take a step forward. I think he can be very good. And I think the Falcons can be very good. But we'll see what it actually looks like when it's all here. It's just there's a lot of volatility, and there are still a bunch of questions that need to be answered between now and even when we get to the end of the season, maybe even the midpoint of the season. All right. Thank you, Sam, for the question. Here's another one. Trevor Joyce. Again, the underscores. We got so many underscores from folks. Trev asks, what happens if Falcons start 2-4 to start the season? I like the back half of the schedule, but don't want to see the wheels fall off before they get there. Trev, that's a great question. That's a very good question. And I want to give you some stats here. I went and looked at the schedule, and the schedule they say is the 4th easiest slate overall. I don't buy anything like that. I think it's the funniest exercise that people do in a league where the margin of victory is about this big. They're going to tell me that because of a couple percentage points, I mean like thousandth of a point, that team has a better schedule than that. It's all the same. They're all 500 winning percentages. They're all tiny, tiny, tiny differences. And unless you're looking at a division that's absolute dog water, which the NFC South has not been very good for a little while, but think about what the New England Patriots went through in the 2000s, right? Where the Jets were just terrible. The Bills were terrible. The Dolphins were terrible. That's one where you can kind of judge that a little bit more. But as far as saying the Falcons have the 4th easiest schedule, margins are tiny, so I don't really want to put too much stock into that. But if you do look at the first 6 games of this schedule, yikes. These are really good teams. You have the Buccaneers to start week 1, then you go on the road to go play the Vikings. At the Panthers, a divisional opponent on the road, which for anybody who's counting at home, generally speaking, when I project the schedule, I automatically count home division opponent. That's a win. Away division opponent, I count it as a loss. Doesn't matter who it is. New Orleans Saints, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, whatever it is, generally when I'm prognosticating, that's what I'm going to do just because it's the divisional opponent. And that's just the way the NFL works. So you start with the Bucs, you go on the road, play the Vikings, Panthers on the road, Commanders at home. Then you have a bye week built in. Then it's the Bills on Monday Night Football. And then it's the 49ers in Santa Clara on the road. So Trev comes in and he says that it's going to be 2-4. 2-4 sounds crazy to most people. You read that schedule. 2-4 sounds kind of good. I think I'd be mostly okay with 2-4. Hopefully they can get to 3-3. 4-2, we're talking about a team that's really damn good. But I'd say 3-3 is achievable potentially if things go really your way. But 2-4 feels like it's something that's likely. Those are 4 teams who made the playoffs last year. You have 5 teams who are projected to win 8.5 games or more. The only other team on that list is your divisional opponent on the road. And that's the second leg of a back-to-back road trip. So I think it's going to be very difficult for the Falcons right out of the gate. It's going to be difficult. But I think the most important thing for this team, we talked about it in the last bit, on the last What If about Zac Robinson. It's the confidence in this team. It's young. It's very young. Like you have guys who've been around and have played at a high level on the offense, like Drake London and Bijan Robinson and guys like that. But you go to the defense and with the quarterback too. It's a guy who's making his 4th start. So if he starts sluggish or starts slow, you might get a little antsy. You might get a little antsy at the head coach position. I really like Raheem Morris. I'm a believer in Raheem Morris. I think he's a damn good coach. But there's also a contingent of the fan base who very firmly believes he's on the hot seat. And I think that that's not the craziest thing. I think it's more that your general manager's on the hot seat. And then if you're going to fire the general manager, you're also probably going to fire the head coach. So he's just going to kind of get caught up in the crossfire there. So what happens then? Do you put Kirk Cousins back in? People might think it's crazy, but it's not all that crazy to me. You have a coach who's desperate to win games. You start 2-4, and then you see the Buccaneers fly out of the gate. You might start panicking a little bit. I think that's a really realistic thought there. But we'll see when all of that happens. But it's I don't think that that's something that they're going to do. I hope to God they don't, because they've kind of crowned Michael Penix as your starter, and they've kind of put all their eggs in that basket at this point. But if you start 2-4, you might start to have questions, and people from the peanut gallery way behind you might start yelling some things. Then you go over to that defense. You have a really young defensive line. You have 2 really young and impressionable edge rushers. You just lost Grady Jarrett in the offseason. You have some questions there. Who's going to step into that leadership spot? It's going to be Caden Ellis, in my opinion. I think he's a guy who's going to do that. David Onyemata is kind of a quiet leader on the defensive line. Leonard Floyd is a guy, a steady hand there at edge that you added in free agency. Jesse Bates, an all-pro safety. He's somebody who's led this defense time and time again. So I'm less worried there, but I'm more worried about what the offense looks like, especially when you're having a quarterback who's young. So you start that way. But all is not lost either. So this team starts 2-4. Everyone's going to be freaking out, myself included. But then you look all the way back to the other side of the schedule, and Trev mentioned it in his question. You go from week 9 on. 7 of the Falcons' 10 games are against teams projected to have losing records. Only 2 of those matchups are true road games. Okay, so you start 2-4. That's where that easiest slate that we were talking about before, that's where that comes into play. It really could. You never know. Because you look at the Colts, it's the Dolphins, it's the Jets, it's the Saints twice, and that's a split, like I said earlier. But you got the Panthers at home, you got the Seahawks, you got the Patriots. That's stomachable. I can manage that. That's all right. And the thing is, if the Falcons can go 7-4 to finish the season, that might be enough to go secure yourself a playoff spot. That's a winning record. We haven't had that in Atlanta. 7 years. Been a while. So we'll see what they can end up doing with it. I think that all of this stuff is going to fluctuate from right now to the end of the season. It's all completely and totally up in the air. But the talent is there for this team to make a playoff run. 9 wins should be enough to get it done. 10 wins, you'd feel a whole hell of a lot better. But we'll see. We'll see. All right, we got another question here. And then we're going to jump into our other questions. Bud Burris, he says, my what if is unspeakable. And you know what it is. And I know Bud. So I wanted to give him a shout out there, but he's a good guy. He's a good friend of mine. He just threw that out there. He loves Younghoe Koo. Lenny Krieg was signed in the offseason. That's a question asking about what is going on with the kicker position. Well, Younghoe Koo is going to be the kicker for the Atlanta Falcons, at least out of the gate. And if he struggles, he struggles. That's when Lenny Krieg might actually get some run there. But ultimately, this job is Younghoe Koo's to lose. He had a career worst 75% or so last year. Lenny Krieg is a career 73, 72. So he's not 100% ready, in my opinion, to be an every week NFL kicker. He's got a hell of a leg. If anybody was watching that game last Friday, you saw that hell of a leg. 57 yards doesn't just happen. 57 yards is extremely impressive. But as far as him supplanting Younghoe Koo, a guy who's making a lot of money guaranteed, and then Lenny Krieg is also somebody you can stick into the International Pathways program. He's going to have a place on this roster, maybe not on the 53 technically, but he is going to maintain his spot on the roster, and the Falcons will hold on to him. They'll just keep prepping him and keeping him ready and kind of keeping him warned and kind of keeping some pressure on Younghoe to make sure he stays up there. All right, folks, I'm going to take one quick break, and I'm going to drink some water here. So if you have questions, drop them in there. Make sure to drop them in, and I'll try to get to as many as I can. I'm going to get into this questions portion of the podcast. We just finished our what ifs. If you have a what if, I'm happy to address that as well. Make sure to like, make sure to subscribe while we do so, but give me 1 second, take a little sip of water. All right, folks, we'll keep on coming back. All right, Colton, this is where we are right here. So does Braylon Trice have any chance of getting cut? We went through our 53-man roster. I have him on the roster right now. Colton, to answer your question from YouTube, yes, of course, he has a chance of getting cut. He has, I don't know how he fits super well in this Jeff Ulbrich system. But they need some beefier guys in that edge rush. And ultimately, they don't have a lot of those guys. You have a Jalen Walker, who's a little bit diminutive. He's a little bit smaller in size. Then you also have James Pierce, who's basically just a designated pass rusher. Leonard Floyd is just a pass rusher. He can give you a lot more ultimately. And I think Jalen Walker is going to continue to develop and kind of be that kind of Caden Ellis for this defense. I think that's in a perfect world. That's what he kind of looks like. He's a better version of Caden Ellis, if you can imagine. But that's what they drafted Jalen Walker to do. He won a Butkus Award for a reason. He's very talented. But as far as Braylon Trice goes, I think he makes the roster, but mostly because he was just drafted last year, and you don't really know what he can do. You know, I don't think that they're going to want to cut a guy who they pick up on day. It was day 3. I think it was round 4 off the top of my head. Maybe it was round 3 at the end of day 2. I can't remember just off the top of my head if it was 3 or 4. If you remember, drop it in the comments and correct me. But ultimately, I don't think that they cut him. No. But I would not be shocked if they actually end up doing that. Terry Clark on YouTube also says, depending on Anderson and Bertrand, his depth is risky. Both guys are injury prone. Like you said, we will need their depth. Yes, their depth more than anything. Divine Diablo is a guy who's been very healthy largely over the last couple of years. He's somebody who's going to be the guy. JD Bertrand was somebody who they didn't expect to be a guy last year. Nate Landman was a guy that they didn't expect to be someone they were putting into that lineup. But injuries happen in the NFL. Injuries, you have to be ready for them. And I think the Falcons are in a better position today than they were this time last year, assuming that Troy Anderson was going to be going down. They weren't, it's not that they weren't ready necessarily. It's just that you were counting on younger guys, unproven guys. Nate Landman there's a reason he's on his next team. He's going to be a journeyman for the next couple of years. I love Nate Landman. We called him the landmine at the station during the Falcons radio network, but he's somebody I like a lot, but there's a reason he's not here anymore. It's just, you need some more athleticism to play the position. And I think Troy Anderson can do that if he's healthy. But the big caveat is if he can stay healthy. He has not been able to do that to any degree so far in his career. Colton, I did not skip your question. I came back to your question. I was going to always come back to it. Brad Clark, he says, is Koo locked in, or does Krieg have a chance to start week 1? Brad, I would say no to Krieg starting week 1. Younghoe Koo is going to be your kicker in the early parts of the season. Now, Younghoe Koo is going to be kicking on Friday. We did get that from Raheem Morris. I would be just shocked if Younghoe Koo is not the kicker week 1, though. You would need to, let's put it this way. I think that Younghoe Koo between now and week 1 can lose the job. Between now and week 1, I do not think that Lenny Krieg can win the job, if that makes sense. It makes sense in my head. So I'm hoping it makes sense to you as well, Brad. Thank you for the question on Facebook. Cody Massey says, so Kobe Bryant doesn't make the team? I don't have him making the 53-man roster. No. Now, again, that can change. He's been dealing with some nagging injuries throughout camp. He's missed a lot of days of practice. He started practice on the NFI list, and he's missed days. He hasn't dressed for several camps, or for several practice days, I should say. There's a chance that he doesn't make this 53-man roster, and he's a UDFA, And I know people love UDFAs. I love UDFAs. It's a great story. But 16 or so across the NFL make it. That's like a half player per team. It's not often that UDFAs make the roster right out of it, But these are guys who they'll stay on the practice squad and maybe they can get elevated and maybe they can see what they can do. That's kind of where I see Kobe kind of being right now. He offers you a lot. I think he can develop into a ball hawking corner with some good size. That's something that a lot of people want, and you run the risk of losing that guy if you do cut him and opt to put him on your practice squad. But I would challenge anybody to say, who would you replace? And I know there's emotional responses that come into that. Clark Phillips, D. Alford, stuff like that. People don't look at fondly, but there's a reason those guys are on the roster. There really is. And it's because they can do a lot of different things. And Kobe, he's a UDFA and we'll see what he can do. But again, all of that can change between now and 12 days from now. August 26th is the final decision date at 4:00. So a lot can change between now and then. Philip Crawford, I kind of addressed this earlier. What do you think of the CJ signing? I think it's just competition. Talking about that the Kobe Bryant position of the UDFA at the cornerback spot. It's just competition. You're going to bring in as many guys as you can. These guys, the front office is constantly scouting. You are constantly looking out and trying to find talented people that you can plug into your team and make them better, right? Most of them are not going to hit, but occasionally you're going to see you're going to find glaring needs. People are going to get hurt. Things are going to happen. Guys are going to get cut. And the Falcons have to be ready to go do that. So that's why you're going to constantly be having guys coming in and out of training camps and having workouts and stuff like that. CJ was one of the guys they worked out about a week or so ago. And so they just brought him back in and they signed him. So it's mostly going to be competition. I don't expect him to make the roster, though. At least not as of right now. That can all change. Terry Clark says that Braylon Trice, basically Braylon Trice, a lot of words. Braylon Trice is putting on a lot of weight. Yes, he is. He's somebody who's going to get in there and be kind of a beefier dude who's going to want to stop the run. That's what this team needs. They need a guy like that. We addressed that a little bit, but then in general, they don't have that right now on the roster. And one of my biggest concerns here for this defense, especially in this Jeff Ulbrich scheme, is when you play an attack style, you have guys who are pushing up the field. And when you have guys push up the field, it opens up creases and run lanes for other opponents to exploit. One of the things that we saw with the Tennessee Titans, specifically with Tony Pollard, is he found space. He found space, and he was able to get into the open field. He had one run that ended up going about 45-ish yards or so, went for a touchdown. And look, it's hard to really tell running, right? So this is why it wasn't something that was heavily reported on. It's hard to tell what a rushing attack looks like when you're not going all the way to the ground, because you're not going 100% in the trenches. You're not going 100% through a tackle. What you grab cloth, you wrap up, and then they kind of blow the play dead. They're not going all the way to the ground. So what happens after the fact? Well, there are a lot of really talented players who make their money right before that whistle's blown with that lower body strength and stuff like that. So you're not going to see people play all the way through. And so it's not always going to be a perfect one-to-one look of what a real game is going to be like. But you bring in a guy like Braylon Trice to kind of give you a little bit more beef on the outside. Javi, I see seat is fire, awful on game days. I'm assuming you're talking about Raheem Morris. They're awful on game days, I think, is a little harsh. I think he made some mistakes on game days last year, specifically in that Commanders game. And Arthur Blank talked about it when he addressed the media at the beginning of training camp. He said he's put an emphasis on working on that. So hopefully he has. Marcus Cook, smart way to use the international spot. You're exactly right. Yeah, that's why they brought him in. That's why they have him here on the roster. That's why he is occupying that spot. David Ducksworth, interesting question here on Facebook. He says, what offensive and defensive players make the biggest leap this year? Give me a second to think. I want to make sure I give you a good answer here, a thoughtful answer. Let's start with defense. I'm going to say Arnold Ebiketie. I think that Arnold Ebiketie showed flashes of being the guy that they drafted with a second overall pick. Well, their second pick. He's really talented. He's somebody who struggled with injuries. He got beat up a lot. He missed a lot of games. And I mean, it was a tough spot for him to be in at the time. David, I'm going to flash your question back up here on the board. Arnold Ebiketie also finishes the season with 5 sacks in 6 games. He flashed in a big way. And there's a reason that they go in and bring in these other guys to create some competition. But I do think that Leonard Floyd is going to add another element on the other side of the field. These guys are going to stay fresh. You have a legitimate bona fide rotation. And so these guys aren't going to be asked to make 100 rushes a game, But I think Arnold Ebiketie is going to come in here and be kind of your primary third down pass rusher for at least the opening part of the season. Maybe James Pierce can jump in there at various times, or Jalen Walker as well, but we'll see on all that as far as rotations go. But I think Arnold Ebiketie can be a guy who can get you up into double-digit sacks. I think he's fully capable of doing that. I think the question now is he going to have enough snaps to get there? Getting sacks, there's a lot of luck involved in getting sacks. It's just being in the right place at the right time enough, and eventually it's going to work your way. And I think it finally worked out for him at the end of last year. And I think some of that success, we're hoping at least, is going to carry over into 2025. On offense, this is, the obvious answer is Michael Penix, and I think that I wanted to give you a different answer because I felt like it was lazy to say it, but Michael Penix has to be the guy who makes a big leap. He's the guy who this team is counting on in the biggest possible way to make a big leap. And I think if he can elevate that completion percentage, if he can complete more than 58% of his passes, which I don't necessarily all the way put the blame on him for completing 58% of his passes, but I think if you can get to that 63 range, 64% range, then you're talking about a much more explosive and effective offense. And you've got the Jimmies and Joes on this team to be very, very effective on offense. And if Michael Penix can help them really take it to the next level, then this is an offense that I think can jump into the top 7, top 8 across the NFL, maybe jump into that high 20s. If you can get them up from like about 23 where they were last year points per game, if you can elevate up to about a 28 or maybe a 29 even, maybe not 29, but if we get to 27, 28 into that 4 touchdown a game range, then you're looking at a really potent offense. And I think it's Michael Penix. He's the guy that you really need to do that. Let's jump into some more questions here. Trying to get as many as I can. Trenton on YouTube, he says Bowman is the hybrid linebacker. Well, he's kind of a box safety, kind of a nickelback. The nickelback corner is kind of the position he's fighting for. He's going back and forth with D. Alford and Mike Ford. But Bowman's a guy who kind of played that role in college. He was a box safety, a hybrid linebacker, to your point, when he was in college. But the Falcons see him projecting into and being a nickel corner for their defense. H. Norman on YouTube, he says, outside of quarterback play, if the Falcons miss the postseason, what would you predict would be the reason why? Injuries. I know that's kind of a lazy answer. Almost. I don't think it is, because I think that the bigger point is that the Falcons have missed second-round picks second and beyond. So not day 1, day 2, 3. They've missed a lot of those, right? And they've also traded a lot of those picks away. So you trade up to go get James Pierce. You send away a second-round pick. It turns into a third-round pick that you get Xavier Watts. But you've done that on several occasions. You do that to go get Matthew Judon last year. You trade a third-round pick to go get Judon. When you do that to that extent, now he's off on a different roster. You're sending away the depth, quality depth that exists on your team. And then when you also have those picks and you miss on those picks, you critically undercut the depth of your football team. So people might say it's a lazy answer, but it's because if the team got hurt, then they don't really have a plan B. Like you lose Drake London. Darnell Mooney is he's a good wide receiver too. He's not a guy who's going to elevate and be your wide receiver one. I don't see that in his blood necessarily. Kyle Pitts is not elevating and become a one-to-one replacement for what Drake London does for you. Bijan Robinson goes down. I think you lose probably the most dynamic playmaker in the NFC. You might be able to say besides like a Saquon Barkley or something like that, but he is right up there with the very best in the NFL. But if you lose him and you go to Tyler Algier, you're okay. I think that's fine. You can survive for a time with that. But if the offensive line goes down, you're in bad shape. If anybody on your defensive line goes down, if you lose a David Onyemata or guys like that, I think you're okay at the depth there. But the linebacker position, you get very nervous. If you lose a Jesse Bates, you get very nervous, especially if you lose an AJ Terrell. You will get very, very nervous. I'm not confident with Mike Hughes as your second corner. Not as confident as the Falcons are necessarily. But if you lose AJ Terrell for any extended period of time, I worry mightily that this secondary is just going to get picked apart. And then you're really counting on your front seven to step up and get the pass rush really clicking in a big gear. But other than that, I mean, it's just Michael Penix. The quarterback play is the number one thing in the offense. And if he doesn't play at a high level, then this whole experiment is going to fail. And that's really what it comes down to. Number one. And I know you wanted to have something other than that, but so I tried to give you one. Hopefully that answered your question. Ghosted, he says, what's up, Garrett? Has the offense been doing anything under center or mostly in shotgun pistol? Full disclosure, everybody, I am not allowed to talk about formations or substitution packages or anything like that. Just it's part of my credentialing status for the Atlanta Falcons. I didn't want to ignore your question. I'm not trying to ignore your question. I'm not ignoring any questions. I'm trying to answer as many as I can here. There's just a lot of them, and I'm trying to filter them through as much as I can. We'll finish with this one. And it's kind of true here. So it's Philip Crawford and John Harrell, both on YouTube. They say, how many sacks are needed for this defense? Does this defense need to be successful? And then John says, sack prediction and who leads the team. So I'll end the podcast here with this kind of combo question about sacks. I think the Falcons need, I want James Pierce or Jalen Walker. I think that'd be a popular answer, but a rookie is probably at best going to give you 5-6 sacks. If they really break out, they might get you 7, maybe 8 even, but to expect anything more than that, I think is a little far-fetched. So you got to go a different direction. Caden Ellis had 5 for you last year. Arnold Ebiketie led the team in sacks last year. That's the guy probably who I would expect to lead you in sacks. And in a perfect world, Arnold Ebiketie does lead you in sacks. Leonard Floyd is also a guy who can get you coming here in 8.5 is a good number. And I think he still got it. After watching him in training camp, that's a guy who is as effective as anybody on this defense. And he's going to come in and he's going to show you just how effective he is. His havoc rate, his ability to get into the backfield and make big plays. You're going to see that. You're going to be very appreciative of it. And you're going to be like, wow, where the hell has that been on this Falcons defense? But in a perfect world, I think that Arnold Ebiketie leads you in sacks. I'd say that Leonard Floyd is probably the better bet. Just because he's a little bit more consistent, you know, a little bit more about what you're going to get from him. He averages right at 8.5 sacks. So if I had to say that, if I had a gun to my head, I'm going to say Leonard Floyd. Sack prediction, or how many sacks does this team need to be successful? A question from Philip. I'd say your threshold is 40. I think that's probably the number that you need to get to. It'd be better if you can get closer to 45, 50, but let's start at 40. That's a number that they have struggled mightily to get to just in general. I think they've done it one time in the last 7 years or so, and that was 2 years ago when they had Ryan Nielsen's defense going in very aggressive. If they can get to 40, I think that's well within reach too, just with the amount of bodies that they have. You have a lot of guys who I think are going to get you 5-6 sacks. And it's going to be more of a committee approach. It's not going to be a situation like you have out in Dallas where you have Micah Parsons or Myles Garrett up there in Cleveland or TJ Watt in Pittsburgh. You're not going to have one guy getting most of your work, right? You're going to be filtering guys through. You're going to be getting a lot of guys' looks, and that's just the way it's going to be for the Falcons, and they're going to hope that that's going to be enough to have success. But I'd say 40 is probably the best bet. I think this is the best pass rush that I've seen from the Falcons. As long as I've been covering the team, this is the best that I think they've ever been. And I think they put a very large emphasis on getting after the passer after Terry Fontenot's heard it for 5 years. His whole time here in Atlanta, that this team cannot get after the passer, and it's shown up on the field too. So I think that they're going to be a lot better in that regard. I think they put a big influx of cash into that, and the defense I think is finally going to be the better for it. So maybe we see that. Maybe that's what it's going to be. But very excited about what the Falcons could end up looking like. But thank you so much for everybody jumping in. If you still have some questions, if I didn't get to your question, drop them into the comments. Make sure that you get them over there. Make sure to like and subscribe on the video. That's how we keep the lights on here. But I'll come back over and I'll try to go through all the comments as best I can. I'll continue taking your questions, and you can also hit me up on Twitter at GChapATL. That's the best way to get in touch with me. If you have suggestions for the show, maybe there are certain things that you want me to hit on. If you have specific stuff, hit me up there. That's the best place to reach me. But you can also drop a comment, and I can follow it up as best I can. Remember, Scott and Nick, they're going live every Monday and Wednesday. So beginning of next week at 8:30, set those reminders. Make sure you're following along, and then I'll be back every Tuesday and Thursday night at 6 o'clock. We're closing out training camp. Everything is closed to the public here on out, so you got to follow along. Go to si.com/NFL/Falcons to get all of the content there, but make sure to hit that like and subscribe button to stay up to date here. My name is Garrett Chapman for Falcons on SI. I will see you all very soon. Until next time, go Falcons.